I don't like that no one thinks about the local people when they go out there, because all the pros that go through there also go through Hawaii, and you constantly hear them harping on about how much they need to respect the locals there. In so many other places, you go to Europe, you try to catch a wave in Europe, good luck. The locals are so protective of their spots. Same thing in Latin America. A lot of the time you have to pay for guides to take you certain places in order to be able to get waves. That's how they've set it up there. But then you get to Mentawai, for some reason everyone gets amnesia and thinks that you don't need to give a fuck about the locals because they're just there on the boat to film, and they don't stop and think, why in probably the most world-class wave-rich zone in the world, why on earth would there not be prominent local surfers?
Welcome to the Water People Podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept and interesting water people on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. For us, this is a place to exchange not just ideas and practices, but stories, experiential knowledge gleaned from the aquatic adventures that shape us. We acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. Let's raise a glass to something bigger than just great beer. Meet Stone & Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small. Today we're in conversation with adventurous young surfer and youth worker Ruby Southwell. So many talented young surfers, especially here in Australia, are pushed through formulaic molds for competition and training. And then there are surfers like Ruby, whose story and surfing are just uniquely their own. In 2021, at age 22, after 3 years of solo traveling, Ruby moved to Indonesia's remote Mentawai Islands, where she surf-guided, taught herself how to tube ride, and lived off-grid with a local family for just over 2 years. Ruby is known as a wildly talented navigator of weighty situations, both on land and in the water. Clips of her have been shared readily on social media, where you've probably seen her riding twinnies, pulling into big barrels, and displacing water in a distinctly feminine way as at Ruby and the Sun, that's sun with two N's. When big surfing came knocking about sponsorship, Ruby took the deal, but she also took the reins. With her content budget, Ruby defied the norms and made a short film about the Mentawai's pioneering female surfer, Siska. Parallel to wave riding and now back in Australia, Ruby works to support at-risk youth with her sights on exploring the best of what her big island home has to offer. She shares generously about the joys and the adversities that have shaped and are shaping her path forward. What were you doing when you were 25?
When I was 25, I was a travelling surfer and I was experimenting with activism. So I remember attending my first couple International Whaling Commission meetings, which are held in obscure places around the world, where the fate of whales around the world were being decided by countries, politicians representing countries. And so I would go there with good friend Howie Cook and report, protest, and then report back to surfing and coastal communities on the decisions being made there. So anyway, that was a bit of a venture there, but it was largely a pretty selfish period of my life, which is understandable because you're just on your own. There's no kids, there's no real ties to other people in the way there are when you get older and you do have a family.
I've been thinking about that a lot after a conversation with Ruby, and we also had a conversation with Josie Prendergast recently. She's in her 20s, and I've been thinking about the decade of the 20s and what purpose it serves in the long view of a life. And I was thinking about when I was 25, actually, in my early 20s, I came to Australia for the first time, and it was an absolutely life-changing experience. We met. I fell in love with this place, with Australia. I was really taught about listening to my gut. I wanted to come to Australia not because of anything logical at all. I just had this hunch, just go to this place, make it happen no matter what. And I ended up spending 3 or 4 months here in a student exchange, and it really changed the course of my life, that trip. Again, not because of I had things set up and a trip planned and things were organized. It was just a thread of curiosity that when I look back and I look forward on life, I feel like those are some of the truest signposts in our lives, those illogical threads of curiosity. Have you experienced anything like that before?
Yeah, for sure. Looking back at that period in time and seeing how much fun can be had in your 20s, if I'm really honest with myself, I was also really sort of not lonely, but a bit hollow feeling and really craving a sense of belonging and mateship and community, basically, having grown up with the whole idea that individual success was the peak of life. And so I was just putting my first
And you were
toes.
successful
Yeah,
by any
well,
measure.
that was the thing. That's what made it
Yeah.
so more apparent that it's so hollow, that whole BS spin of a goal. Because I literally had you couldn't get a more dreamy existence, just getting money in the bank, being left alone to my own devices to go surfing whenever, wherever I want on the planet. It's it doesn't get any better than that, really.
Yeah.
No more decadent, comfortable
On paper.
life. But the feeling in my body and my general being was that it was also hollow after a few laps around the planet following the surf and all of that. It was just how much can you actually surf and party and make lots of friends and do all that before it does feel that way? And it was really quick for me. And so that's why I started attending those whaling meetings and started joining up with Sea Shepherd and Paul Watson and doing things to try and remedy that feeling. And this conversation with Ruby is such a great reminder of that period and how exciting it is and how crucial it is to have clarity at that time where your friends, yourself, you're really easily dragged into the party cycle and, taking and experimenting with all kinds of stuff. But what comes at the price of all those good times is, mental clarity, emotional clarity. So I actually at that time wasn't drinking. I didn't touch anything, didn't eat sugar. I was a full vegan. I really needed to be clear, because I could easily get lost in my 20s, I reckon. And then when you listen to Ruby and just feel the joy in her voice comes from that kind of clarity, she is clear. She is clear about what she likes, what she doesn't like, how it feels to be her in the world, what surfing really feels like under all the layers that could be heaped upon it. And I just truly feel inspired by her. A lot of our conversations I feel lit up and stuff, or my mind is opened and things. But with her, I really feel a spirited inspiration and a feeling of just hope and joy and depth. And it's just so wonderful. How did you feel?
So similarly, I was in the episode, I mentioned this book that I found, and you laugh at me, when I was 25. I found it incredibly difficult. The amount of options. I had heaps of debt from university, so I was working menial jobs trying to chip away at my debt before compounding interest kicked in after 1 year. You have a year in the States to start paying off your student loan debt before interest starts running out of control. And that was my goal then. And I paid it off, but I was surfing in every spare moment during that time, trying to refine my center. And that clarity was really important for me too. That was also a time of dogmatic veganism and really exploring my feminism and writing about the intersection of all of those things. And I was just doing it for free as a blog during that time. And I feel like that free work is really the foundation of my whole work life now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's amazing how things that are just hunches in our 20s can become the foundation for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And if that's the case for Ruby, then what a great life.
I'm so excited to see where she takes her surfing specifically. Yeah. Gosh, for me, she's such a blend of Leah Dawson's loose mid-length surfing and then Steph on a 20. Yeah. Speed and moving with her hips, and I'm just so inspired by the way she rides waves, and gosh, I just want to see and know more about her story as it unfolds.
We always begin by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Do you have a story about a time like that you'd be willing to share with us?
Every experience that I've had, I feel like it's changed me. Even a small sentence that someone drops to you at the right moment, and you're just well, that's potent. I'm going to think about that for the next few years, and let that grow inside of me. But definitely there's been a fair few experiences over the last like 6 or so years of solo travel. But before any of that started, when I was growing up, there was probably something, that went on that was more influential to putting me on the path that I'm on now than probably anything else. And around that time, there was like a lot of turmoil happening in my family, and home was like a pretty gnarly place to go to. And there was quite a lot of mental health issues that were starting to come out of people, and walking into that all the time and being faced with that, you're like, oh, wow, okay, like you can't run from what's going on inside. And if you do, the pain that you'll cause accidentally is, I would imagine, hard to live with. So it was probably the biggest blessing of my life, I think, to grow up in a family that was like unsafe, to experience everything that comes with like domestic violence and stuff like that. Because from that moment on, I was like, wow, I want to look in myself at all the pain and sit with it and get to know it and love it and let it out, so that like I don't run and just spike everyone on the way, And so that was so important. And it's so funny because I was in all that and trying to cope with that. And I was like, okay, so I want to be a peaceful person. So people who do yoga look pretty peaceful. Like, why don't I go do that? And so I just went to the local yoga studio and signed up and got super into it. And then it all sort of started to unfold from there, like learning about different types of philosophies that fall under the Hindu umbrella. And here I am, ready to have this peaceful experience. And I signed up, and it was a Bikram studio, and I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, oh, here we go, my soulful journey begins. And I walk into the room, and it's like 40-something fucking degrees in the middle of summer. And I remember being like, oh, this is strange. But they'll open the windows, like it'll get fresh. And it just got worse and worse. And for 90 minutes, I was just like sweating and fumbling and like dying. And they were like, don't drink your water. And I was like, oh my God. And for some reason I went back. I never did a Bikram class again, but for some reason I went back. But that was so funny. I remember I was walking out and just laughing to myself, and I was like, life is so fucking weird. I thought that was going to be full of peace. That was
full of suffering. Full of suffering.
Yeah, and that's how it goes, huh? But so that was a super difficult time in my life, but I always, and even in the moment, I loved it, like in a way of knowing that it was a blessing and knowing that it was helping me learn things that I was not really equipped to understand yet, but I knew were gonna like blossom within me. So it was cool. It kind of gave me a nice lens then to start traveling. I started traveling a few years later.
What age are we talking here?
So that was when I was like, we were removed when I was like 16, and then I started traveling when I turned 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
Taken from your family.
Yeah, so my family's a bit bizarre. Like, I don't have any contact with my biological parents. So my biological mum was the abuser, and I was raised by my dad, who we're not related to, which I don't like saying, but just for story purposes. But I was raised by my dad, and he's exceptional, but the family justice system's really funny. And, it's easy to villainize men in like domestic situations. It's really hard for people to understand that women can be the same. So it was really difficult to get out of her care, like super difficult.
Wow.
Yeah, it took years, and it wasn't until a neighbour intervened and took us to the police station that day, which we'd have so many interactions with the police. But a neighbour intervened, and she took us, and it was the same story. We got there, and the admin police lady was like, go away. And then that neighbour was like, no, like, you've got to talk to them. And something about a bystander perhaps was the straw that broke the camel's back for the cops maybe. But finally we got removed. But unfortunately my little sister didn't get removed. That was pretty gnarly. And then it was another few years until she left. So, yeah.
Ruby, I'm so sorry.
Well, see, this is the funny thing. It's when you say it, people want to pity you.
Yeah, not pity.
'Cause it's like-
No, not pity. I had domestic violence in my home too, growing up. And it doesn't feel raw to me either. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like a hurt on the surface at all. But it's also not the same as like a whole loving, nonviolent upbringing either. It's something else. And our adversities shape us into who we become. And you've obviously grown into this incredible young woman because of the adversities and the joys that you've experienced. But still, you know, I'm sorry for the little girl in you who maybe her needs weren't met in all the ways that she needed to have needs met.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's nice. Well, if you've gone through it too, it must be nice to be in your position now and like, you know, get to do what you're doing. And, you know, I'm sure it's like a full circle moment where you like, just by being a mum and caring and loving, it must be like, oh.
But also
This
you
is
go,
filling me up.
but also you get to see like, these are the choices. I can choose to do that. I can choose to hit, because if you've been hit, we often have, as parents, the way our parents parented come back up in us. And my mom wasn't the abuser, but I have this hitting urge that shocked me when we had our little boy. I got to face that choice many times. Like, am I going to behave that way or am I going to behave this way?
Yeah,
Am I going to
wow.
do better or am I going to continue on the habit that has been part of my family story? We get to decide.
I could so see that. And just, yeah, even in how I have no idea how intense it must be to be a parent, but in all those moments and when the stress piles up and piles up and piles up, how, yeah, confronting it must be to have those other parts illuminate. You're like, whoa, I was convinced I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I was convinced I had nothing to do with that,
Yeah.
but I learned otherwise. I had to face it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
let's
Oh my
be-
gosh, you're
well,
so brave to share. Thank
And
you.
exactly, that's
Thank
what I was about
you.
to say, is that part of these conversations we have with people, a really big part of them, which makes them like useful in the world, is when someone shares like what you just did, because nearly all of us, our first reaction to being asked that question is what you said at the start. Oh, every moment in my life has been a thing that's done that. And we've had a few key people who I've known a very long time who are great storytellers do that. And we've gone on to have great conversations, though there wasn't quite the depth reached in those conversations, and which means there wasn't quite the same usefulness in those conversations for people who are listening. So it's really good to like stop right now and just acknowledge that in this dynamic, when we're having a recorded conversation or in any conversation we're having with people in our lives, when we have a moment to present a vulnerable, sort of soft, open part of our story and ourselves to another, usually that is something that leads to a great friendship, a great conversation at least, great reflection or thought from there on. Like you said before, a sentence. That's
Yeah.
just what you said could be something that someone listens to right now and just goes, wow, I'm not alone. I thought that was just my weird family story. Because pretty much all of our families are pretty messed up.
Yeah.
Like there isn't a normal
No.
happy sunshine, rainbows and lollipops family. Like we're all pretty tweaked. So it's really great when we have this opportunity. And so thanks for doing that. And I just think that's a good thing to acknowledge.
Yeah, thanks.
When I was 25, I encountered this book called The Quarter Life Crisis.
Wow, that's so depressing. You're too young to have that.
I know, but
That is so
Oh my
good.
Lord.
you're 25.
Was it in the Oprah Winfrey Book Club, Lauren? It was, wasn't it?
Don't try
I'll
to
tell you, I
knock
won't talk-
Oprah Winfrey.
I won't say
because
anything
we'll have
bad.
that conversation, and people will be shocked by how much you love her.
That's right.
No, I remember picking up that book because at 25, I felt, and I think a lot of people can relate to this in their 20s, it's hard. It can be difficult. You're sorting through who you want to be in the world on your own as an adult, where you want to live, where you want to go, what you want to experience, how you're going to edit the infinite options of modern life, which we're the freest generation ever with the most opportunities and resources and options and places to live. But with that can come analysis paralysis. Like, it's easy to get stuck in, what do I do? Like, where do I begin? Especially when you have like phones to scroll through everyone else who looks like they're getting it 100% right.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what's 25 like for you right now?
That's a good question. Honestly, like, I'm probably the happiest I've ever been. Yeah. Like, I had everything that you're describing. I would say, like, the last 2 years with that, of just like, especially even like with my sponsorship, just being like, fuck, what am I doing? Like, where am I going with this? This is so bizarre. And I was just out in the world having great experiences and obviously feeling grateful for what I had, but also just sort of being like, oh, it's so unfulfilling, like, and bizarre to be in that life where like all you're trying to do is get a clip and like, I don't know, you got this sticker staring at you every time you surf and you're like, bloody hell, this is intimidating. Like, I don't know, it was just always in my head. And then so yeah, when I've come back to Australia now, it's been epic. Like, exploring this country and feeling like, oh my God, this is actually where I'm from. Because I didn't know much of Oz because, yeah, grew up on the sunny coast, saved up as much as I could and left as soon as I could. So I wasn't doing trips or anything. I didn't have my driver's. I just got my driver's license.
Oh, congratulations.
That's pretty funny.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
And none of your family surfed?
No, they don't surf. So we weren't doing like surf trips or anything. That Broken Head trip I was telling you about was the only surf trip I ever went on. And even when I started traveling, I didn't take a board. I didn't take a board until 2021. Yeah. I was just like, yeah, just going around. But yeah, so came back to Oz in start of this year and I was really like, oh, I wonder what this is going to be like, you know, like I've just done 6 years by myself overseas, like making it work somehow. What's it going to be like to go back into everyone would always say to me, the real world, you know, oh, but you wait till you go back to the real world. And I was like, oh, all right, shit, now it's actually happening. But I hate that saying anyways, because I'm like, well, how real is my life though? Like, it feels pretty real.
Yeah.
Anyways, came back here and it's been so good. Like learning about the Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous stories, because I know nothing. So that's been epic and so inspiring and so fun, and just cruising around up and down the coast, like really with no clue what I'm doing, but just like putting my tunes on, finding a wave here and there, and like just taking whatever I can get, not even like hunting or anything. And like just, yeah, trying to get as many solo sessions in as possible, because that was unheard of overseas. So yeah, it's been amazing. And just all I feel like lessons that I was seeking from being overseas and conversations that I had and different cultures and everything that I experienced, I feel like it's all settled into me now. And now that I'm here, I have many plans of things I want to do overseas, but I almost just don't want to leave Oz. I'm so in love with Oz. I'm like, this is the best place. The freaking sky is so blue. The water's so clear. Everyone is just a larrikin. I'm just laughing with everyone all the time, like just meeting the best people and, yeah, feeling like everything makes sense and life's really good. And I'm not concerned about my future at all. Like, I just want to surf. I want to see like what waves Oz has, because from what I've seen so far, it's so much better than everywhere else, which is crazy.
I'm so inspired by your surfing. You're one of my favorite surfers by far. I love your blend of like grace and power, and the way you're such an incredibly skilled surfer, but not in an overbearing way. You just do surfing beautifully. And I love watching you surf. So I'm so excited to sit down and chat with you, Ruby. Can you trace us the trajectory from like, what were your first surfing experiences like? Where did you pick up a board, having grown up in a non-surfing family? Was surfing an escape for you from the family life that you had? It definitely was for me. And then how did you get from there to living in the remote Mentawai Islands?
Bit of a like random trajectory, real start-stoppy and not like the dreamed up wow, she's such a soul surfer story, like at all. But I don't know, I always knew how to be in the ocean because I did nippies and all of that and was really into it, and my family like pretty athletic. Didn't have much doubt about being in the ocean. It wasn't really a scary place. I was always like, and we lived at Alex, so like we were really close by to the ocean. That was always a thing, you know, the ocean was always there. And the surfers always seemed really cool, but like I wasn't one of them. And then when I was like 13 or 14, I was finally like, ugh, please, Dad, can I please have a surfboard? And he got us one. Had this little blue Almeric fish thing. And it was like 5'8". I thought it was the coolest board ever. I couldn't duck dive it for the first like 2 years because I was this tiny, tiny little thing. Like I was so small. It's funny because I'm pretty like built and stuff now, but I was like tiny. Like everyone thought I was going to be a midget. Like I don't know if you can say that word, but anyways.
We know what you mean.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I got a board when I was like maybe 14 or something, and just taught myself. And my sister got a board at the same time, and she was sort of doing it, but she kind of, the bug didn't really bite her that hard, I guess, and she sort of started doing some other stuff. And then, yeah, I kept going. And then when shit was really hitting the fan with the family, I actually stopped. So it wasn't an escape for me. Like I stopped. We were living in a different place. I just wanted to do yoga. Like I didn't want to surf. And then, yeah, when I started traveling, I was going through some zones that had some fun waves, like nothing exceptional, because like the first part of traveling was like a lot through Asia. And the only surf spots I was in was like Siargao and Sri Lanka, which was random. And that was fun. But yeah, it was actually in 2021 when a friend shaped me my fish that I ended up like riding forever. And yeah, I never had a new surfboard. I'd never had a custom.
Wow.
And like it was so cool. And then it was purple and I got to pick the color and it had glass ins, and I was like, this is so cool. I'd never even seen a board with glass ins. I was like,
wow,
this is so sick. And I just looked at it and I was like, yeah, I love this thing. And I took it down to the spot that I grew up at, which is the Bluff at Alex, which is a shocking wave. It's gutless. Like it's just, sorry for anyone that lives there, but like I can say it because I grew up there. It's not good. And anyways, the first wave I got, it was magic. You know, I never had that like magic board experience. It was magic. First wave I got, stood up, did this. Funny, I remember I stood up and I was like, whoa, that's quick. And I did this like little pretend bottom turn, and I was like, oh, I remember thinking, I'll try to do a cutback, like thinking there's no way I'm going to be able to. This board's like way too crazy. And it was just the most silky thing I've ever felt. Like I swear I remember that more than any barrels that I've ever gotten. And just remember when I rode out of that little cutback, I was like, what do I have under my feet? This is crazy. And that was it. That was the board that I ended up like, yeah, just completely changed my perspective on surfing. And then I went to Latin America and I was just chasing point breaks because barrels hadn't even come into my mind yet. And then some people were talking about barrels and I was like, probably I could do that. And then from thinking about it for a bit and sort of asking some questions and stuff, then I was like, oh, I should go to Mentawai. And I managed to wriggle my way into Mentawai in COVID times. And yeah, that was it. I was just waiting for the first swell and I was dreaming of getting barreled like every night, like watching as many barrel stuff as I possibly could. Just my barrel consciousness was like in full swing. And yeah, I just was lucky because I didn't really doubt myself. Like I just was like, well, of course I can do it, you know, just put yourself in the position where you can. And I felt confident enough in my abilities. Like I knew I wasn't going to, you know, be an idiot and throw my board around and that kind of thing. So it was just waiting for the right swell to come. And then we got some fun swells and then, yeah, that was it. I was hooked.
That is so great. I love, like you said, like the stop-starty and sort of zigzaggy organic nature of that sounds so refreshing in a world of formulaic young surfers. Like, you know, most young kids now that have a slight potential in, you know, being hyper competitive and all of that are pretty quickly railroaded into making formulas about how to get the highest heat scores and all of that, which is fine. That's great for lots of kids, I'm sure, but there's always going to be the zigzaggy stories, and it's just, great to make sure we hear about those as well. And that's such a unique one. That's so fascinating that you had time away. Lauren also had a similar thing where you were a deep diver of surfing as a little Florida surf rat, like deep, had the puka shell necklace, the absolutely torched honey roasted chicken skin, even though you were only a teenager. Like, you were such a...
This is so flattering. Wow.
You were such a surf rat. No, come on. The pictures of you at that age.
I know what you really think of me.
That is so good.
I talk about myself. Anyway, what I was saying was that you and a lot of us, but you and I, but specifically you had a really deep dive childhood into surfing. You were...
From 14
Yeah.
too. That was when I got my first.
Oh,
board as
really?
well. Yeah.
True. That's cool.
But then you went to university, and it was still
And I
part of
only
your
wanted
life.
to ride longboards. I wanted to go slow. I
Yeah,
loved
and isn't
going
that funny?
slow.
Because I grew up at a longboarding wave, but I've never ridden a longboard.
Wow.
Yeah. I
That's
think
so
in
interesting.
Waikiki I probably rode one or something, but
Yeah.
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 But I think that's what inspired the way that I wanted to surf, because that's all I was watching.
Yes.
And I wasn't ever watching growing up, at least, surf videos and stuff, because they're boring.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, no
Yes.
offense. No.
We're not offended. It's the truth. We're exactly the same. They are.
So, Ruby, how did you go about working with a brand sponsorship and then it coming to a sudden halting end?
I mean, it was flattering to get offered a sponsorship, and especially because it wasn't even in the realm of existence for someone like me, some random, especially growing up on the coast. We've got Isabella Nichols, Dimity Stoyle, Sophie McCollick, Jaleesa, Keely Andrews, all these girls that are pretty similar age group to me, and they're exceptionally good, so much more technical than I will ever be. They were the girls that were doing the whole sponsorship thing. Never really crossing my mind, and definitely not trying to get filmed and that kind of thing. Just before the sponsorship was offered to me, it was really funny. I'm not kidding, 2 days before, I was talking to Barlin, who's the guy that was filming me a lot in Mentawai. And I was like, yeah, I just want to get sponsored so I can use that money and put it into the village. How good would that be? Then I would have some leeway to be able to do something. When it happened, I reached out to you, and I tried to reach out to anyone who I thought might have an idea. So I reached out to Parcha, just got an idea and said yes, and cool to be sponsored, I guess. But I didn't really love it, because surfing was never something that anyone had that much input in for me. So then it wasn't them. They were cool. It was me. I was like, fuck, I've got to do something sick now.
Creates a self-consciousness,
yeah. And I would always have my hands over this label just because it was so huge and looking at me all the time. And I was like, oh God, I just don't want to think about it and that kind of thing. So I think for a bit it was a bit confusing, but I don't want to talk too much shit on it. How good, just get paid to go surf.
Well, the interesting thing is what you chose to do with the resources that you had while you were working with a brand, and that was to make this beautiful film called Siska. Can you talk us through who Siska is and why you chose to make a film with her?
Yeah. So Siska's a legend. She is probably everyone talks about core surfers these days, and everyone just reckons that they're so gnarly. And she is actually probably the only core surfer that I've ever met. She is so cool. We met, it was still COVID time, so there wasn't really too many people around. And
where did you go? Where did you start? How did you set up? Where did you live?
Yeah, so Mentawai is a string of islands, and there's a main island called Seabarut, and that's kind of the only place where there's still cultural connection and that kind of thing. And just south of Seabarut, just south of it, 20-minute boat ride, is what's now coined as the playgrounds region. And that's where, Kandui and Bankbolts and all those famous waves are. And then you have a few more islands further south in that zone, but I didn't really have too much to do with them. So I was in the playgrounds region when I rocked up, and it's funny because that's actually just agricultural land. So there's a few Mentawaians, like the old lady Tateo, who's a legend, she lives there, but most of them don't live there. They go there to harvest copra and then they leave and go back to their village. And that's kind of like when they say that they're going to work, they don't say like, I've got work. They say like that they're going to go cari uang, which is like, I'm going to go look for money. And so they do that in the trees. So they think that trees are like their ATM is the way that they described it to me, which is so awesome. And yeah, when they need money, they go to the trees and they harvest what they need to from the trees, or they'll go plant more and just take care of them and that kind of thing. So yeah, so when I went over there, I started off on Massacut Island, which is the one closest to Seabury, and there's Bank Vaults is on that island. And yeah, I reached out to this surf camp thing and I was like, oh, I'll come surf guide for you, which is so funny because I'd never been there before. But I knew they weren't going to have any guests. So I was like, that's just my way to do it. That's my way in. And he was like, okay. So went out there and was sussing it out, and there was this little girl that lived on the island called Marawa, and she was the only kid there. So she was so lonely. She was like 4 years old and we became best friends. And she was the first one to teach me Indo, and which is crazy to think about because when you're 4, like your concept of language it's not a thing. You just speak and you get spoken to, you know? And so she would speak to me and I wouldn't understand it. And she was really sassy and she'd look at me like, God, you're an idiot. Like, I'm telling you stuff and it's just going right over your head. And then she would start to click on like, oh, she's got different words than me. And so she'd start pointing at things and saying what they were and like being really obvious about it so that I would click on because I'm a Dumbo. And so like it was so cool, that whole experience. And so we would hang out all the time, and yeah, there was no women in the ocean at all. And I was like, oh God, this is funny. Like they're not even like curious. They don't even want to like jump in or anything. And so, but Marawa was really curious. Like she would go right to the edge if I was going to go out on the boat or something, or if I was going to go surf out front, she'd go right to the edge and then like just sort of wait there and watch and kind of thing. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'll take her in. And so yeah, I was trying to get her into it and she was super into it, and she'd always be like, let's go swim in the ocean. Let's go swim in the ocean. Like, kita mandi lao. And which was so good. And she just thrived on it. And so I was trying to get her mum involved and her mum wasn't keen. And then I was like, oh, okay. And I left the island to go to Nias. And then that's when the Billabong sponsorship came about. And then came back. And when I came back, there was this girl. I was walking out to pit stops and I saw this person sitting out really wide on like the wide peak with this huge smile on her face and just getting all the bombs that were coming through and like sitting in the perfect spot, not even paddling, just like gliding onto them. And when I was walking past, I was like, that's a girl. I was like, no way. And so I paddled straight out to her and I was like, hey, like, what's your name? You know, doing the whole thing, like being a fangirl. And she's like, oh, I'm Siska. And we were talking and she just started surfing again. She was telling me that she'd surfed like her whole upbringing, but they had to move away from the ocean for school. And she just got in a job at Pit Stop Hill, which is a surf resort in front of the wave pit stops. And she just started again like a month ago, just before I'd left. And I was like, what? And she was ripping like straight away, like could stand up, make her own little lines and that kind of thing. And yeah, so we were chatting and I was like, oh, like, so what's your favorite wave to surf? And she was like, oh, I've only surfed this one. And I was like, huh? And so that's where it all started, because I was like, what do you mean you've only surfed this one? Because before this, it was COVID. There was no boats around. People weren't moving around. But now COVID had finally finished. People were able to start, like tourists were able to start coming in. The resorts were opening back up and the boats were moving around. And yeah, so she was like, no, I can't go anywhere. Like it's too expensive and that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, that's not cool. I've been going around everywhere for the last few months. And you've lived here for 20 years and this is it. This is all you know. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, well, I was like, don't worry. I'm going to take you somewhere. And she was like, okay. And then I went back in and I think I emailed Billabong or something straight away. And I was like, oh, I've got this chick. She is so good. Like, she just is exactly everything you'd want to be as a surfer. Like, what can we do for her? Wasn't really too much that they could do for her. So then you get like content money each year. And so I told Cisco, I was like, oh, well, how do you feel about getting filmed? And like, we could do a little story on you and we could surf whatever ways we want to. And she's so gung-ho. Like, she was like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, then it was just starting the process of planning to make that film. And
You'd never made a film before.
no one that did it had ever made a film before. Like, I just called up my best friend because she has a camera, and I was like, hey, dude, like, do you want to do this together? And yeah, it was awesome. It was so fun. And like, we bought everything. Like, I was in South Africa just before I started filming. And I was like buying everything online, hoping that it would come in time, like trying to figure it out. Like, everything was so last second for it. But it couldn't have worked any better. So how's this? That whole season was just plagued by this south-swell, south-wind combo, which for North Mentawai is so atrocious. Like, there's pretty much only hideaways you can surf. Siska only goes right so far. She's only ever surfed rights. And I was like, fuck. Like, we really need some northwest wind. And the week that we filmed, every freaking day was northwest, and that was it. The only time in the whole season that there was a run of northwest was the exact week that we filmed. And like, it was just amazing. I remember saying to my best friend Kat, who did the filming, I was like, the night before we started, I was like, oh dude, just hope that like I can take her to, what's that wave called? The one in front of Kandui Resort. Four Bobs. Yeah. It's like, I hope I can just take her to Four Bobs and like show her that region because that's so beautiful, and have her experience that kind of wave like alone. I hope no one's going to be on there. We surfed like 7 hours there just by ourselves. Blue sky, perfect wind, perfect size. She was frothing, like got a million waves. And it was so cool because when we turned the corner from the bay at pit stops, and like she got to have that view of all the other islands.
Yeah, it
she
opens
was
right up.
Yeah, she was just like, whoa, like this is so beautiful. And
Had she never seen it before?
she told me that she hadn't. I think she's gone out there once, but she told me that she hadn't seen it before like that. And maybe she'd never seen it on a clear day or something. I don't know. But it was pretty cool because she was like fizzing. And then she had this moment and she was like, oh, like, because I was telling her, that's this place, that's that place, that's this wave, you know, this needs that swell, this needs that. And she had this little moment where she was like, oh, it's my home. And I don't know that. Like, and I was like, oh. Like, no, let's change it, you know, let's see what can happen from making this. So yeah,
it's so beautiful. And that's the part of the film that just really hit me in the heart. You brought up some text on the screen and it said, as a sponsored surfer, Ruby has the privilege to effortlessly explore the world-class waves of Mentawai. And then the next slide says, quote, despite it being Siska's birthright, she has never had the freedom to embrace what's on her doorstep. And with those words, I was just like, wow. Think of all the surfers who have explored that region, come through, gotten the best surfing memories of their lives, and not had a connection with a local person like you had, and never chose to do something about it like you did and have and are. And that gives me so much hope for the future of our culture, because you saw someone who you could help and you did it.
Yeah, I think when I got out there and when I started to connect with the community there, they were so warm and welcoming. You know, they were so like keen to teach me about their culture, have me involved in their ceremonies. And I was like so grateful. I was like, I can't believe this. What a privilege, you know, like why are they letting me in? This is incredible, you know. And it started to really irk me the longer that I was there, the lack of community there was in the ocean. And like, I actually had this conversation
from visitors
and the you know, the lack of faces from the locals. Like you hear this a lot, and it's disgusting. Like, you hear the resort owners say, how great is this? If this was Hawaii, you'd have to share this with all the locals. Like, here, there's no locals that surf. And I actually remember the first time one of the resort openers said that to me, And I had this moment where I was like in my own head, because I wasn't going to have a go at him in the lineup, but I was like, that's disgusting. Like, how are you proud of that? Your kids have a beautiful surfing existence because they've grown up here, like on the Mentawai Islands, and you don't want to give that to the people whose land you're profiting from? Like, what? How is there no pathway? Like, there's not that there's no Mentawai surfers because they're scared. It's because there's no opportunity, you know? And
Because it costs money.
because it costs money.
To boat from
Because
wave
it
to
costs
wave.
money, and because they're also kind of fed that there is no opportunity for them. You know, it really disappointed me, that mindset that was there. And like, it's just like another form of colonization almost, you know?
Yeah.
100%.
Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just playing out right in front of my eyes. And I was like, I just don't want to borrow that. And and it was awesome when I was with Siska and we were surfing Napusi, which is another like just fun, mellow ride. And it was the biggest wave she'd ever surfed in. There was like some solid little sets coming through. It was kind of maxing out for that wave. And there was this one American bloke, because I was pushing Siska in on the wide peaks, and there was this one American bloke that kind of snaked her for it, and I pushed her onto it, and he came back and he had a go at me, and I was just like, mate, she has lived here for 20 years. You have been here for 20 minutes. You do not deserve a single one of these waves more than she does. Like, you know, and it was just really nice to be able to do that in front of her, because she would never say it. But for her to like watch me say it, she was like, that was cool. You know, like, but yeah, I just don't like the dynamic out there. I don't like that no one thinks about the local people when they go out there, because in this day and age, I don't understand how that mentality is still a thing. I don't understand, like, all the pros that go through there also go through Hawaii, and you constantly hear them harping on about how much they need to respect the locals there. In so many other places, you go to Europe, you try to catch a wave in Europe, good luck. The locals are so protective of their spots.
Yeah.
You know, same thing in Latin America. A lot of the time you have to pay for guides to take you certain places in order to be able to get waves. That's how they've set it up there. But then you get to Mentawai, and that just all, for some reason, everyone gets amnesia and thinks that you don't need to give a fuck about the locals because they're just there on the boat to film, and they don't stop and think, why in the probably the most world-class wave-rich zone in the world, why on earth would there not be prominent local surfers? And so, yeah, I just didn't like that.
Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible.
Let's raise a glass to something bigger than just great beer. Meet Stone & Wood, a brewery that thinks big and acts small, right from the heart of Byron Bay. Stone & Wood isn't just about brewing beer, it's about building a community. Certified B Corp and driven by environmental and social responsibility, they're all about making a positive impact one sip at a time. Their philanthropic arm, the Ingrained Foundation, supports local grassroots organizations, channeling funds and volunteer hours straight into the communities they call home, focusing on environmental and social causes close to the heart. Here's to Stone & Wood for crafting exceptional brews and for making a tangible difference in our Northern Rivers community. Patagonia is in business to save our home planet. Founded by Yvonne Chenard in 1973, Patagonia is a surf and outdoor apparel company based in Ventura, California. As a certified B Corp and a founding member of 1% for the Planet, the company is recognized internationally for its product quality and environmental activism, as well as its contributions of nearly $230 million to environmental organizations. Patagonia's unique ownership structure reflects that Earth is its only shareholder. Profits not reinvested back into the business are paid as dividends to protect the planet. Futures makes the first surf fins from recycled fishing nets. Alpha Net Plus is an innovative collaboration between Futures Fins and Borreo, blending carbon and discarded fishing nets. To date, they've transformed more than 35,000 kilos, that's about 77,000 pounds, of discarded fishing nets into new Alpha fins at their headquarters in Huntington Beach, California. Nets that would have otherwise ended up in the ocean. Made for high performance and tested by the best, from our very own Dave Rastovich to friend of the podcast, John Florence, Alpha is available in a wide range of fins for those who want to make a difference with every wave you catch. Learn more at futuresfins.com.
The best summer surf seasons go hand in hand with fried eyeballs. Looking perpetually red-eyed might be an indicator of good times, but it also hurts. Good sunnies are non-negotiable, but ours inevitably get jumbled in the beach bag and the lenses get shredded by sand. Child, that's C-H-I-L-D-E, Eco Eyewear reimagines the way we use sunglasses. Instead of tossing out frames because of scratched lenses, the Child for Life program offers free lens replacement up to 12 months from purchase and for a small fee thereafter. Child makes sunnies and prescription glasses from plants, not petrol. It's eyewear that's made to last and able to be repaired for a smaller energy footprint. Let's reimagine the culture of disposability together. Learn more at childeyewear.com.
It's an interesting point in time for that region with the surf colonization phenomena, where things like the land-based tourism systems have just proliferated there. Like, that is new, and that you and this experience can start happening in those places is a really positive sign, I reckon. And you will certainly, you might be one of the first people to do this, if not the first, but I think there'll be a lot more people who are seeing this scenario for what it is and the exploitation, and just won't be able to turn a blind eye. And I think, just that ignorance, and I've been a part of it. I was totally a part of it in the early days of going there. Just the ignorance of it. You just look, and like you said, agricultural land, you're just looking at coconut groves everywhere, and then you're watching boats go by loaded with old growth timbers that are just destroying any patches of original bush that are left somewhere there. And you could see, I had an interest in anyway, in that part of it, the ecological side, the dynamite fishing, the degradation on the ecological level. But at that point in my life, I was in my 20s, I wasn't really tuned in and paying proper attention to the totally linked social exploitation, the exploitation of people for those industries to be happening out there. And then the surfing industry just slipped straight into that same type of headspace of extraction, going in, having these experiences, taking lots of pictures of them, extracting that back to the Western world to sell pieces of shit that most of us don't need, and shitty clothing that were also being created with an exploitative way about them. And just that whole period there was happening with boats just sliding by and in and out, and it was all kept so quiet and there was no discussion. And if you wrote anything like this in the stories that you tried to get in surf media, where you're talking about, the excessive nature of logging, the lack of fish that are in so many areas now that used to be so abundant, or the monoculture coconut world and palm oil, all that sort of thing, it would never get published. No surf magazine wanted to know anything about any of that.
It was too disruptive of selling the dream,
selling
right?
the dream, living the dream, the
ignorant,
escapist. It's all about
dream.
escapism, like trying to just escape through surfing and all of that. But that's then, and this is now, and it's a different scenario. And the land camp, boat, schism, all that tension, all that sort of shit. Even this tension, that the idea you can go there and there's no locals and all of that whole story, that load of bullshit story is crumbling and changing. Do you feel like that is? Do you feel like there is a subtle thing that can start to change there?
And if not, what can people who are going to specifically the Mentawai, what should they be doing to do better?
Look, I don't know how to answer that, and they're the ones to answer that question. But my approach has been to just be so curious and to learn and to be really thankful for what you learn, and then consider how you can give back, and if you have the time, just go and have a chat.
Exactly. That's the one. I found that too, going there years ago, when the Kandui resort was being built in front of Four Bobs, just where you were explaining there. There was an incredible local or semi-local construction team, and there was one fella who I became really close with, and he was from another island, and he was there working. But sitting down with At and actually asking him about his story was so amazing, and understanding that the work he was doing was happening so that his sisters and brothers could be going to Padang to do schooling. And he was out there working so hard with so much skill. I've never seen the handiwork with timber like what this guy At was doing. And I had one of my family members, Shauno, my brother-in-law, who's an incredible craftsman as well, who was just marveling at this guy's skill, at what he could do out there. But it enriched my time there so much that then every time I went back over the years, I would go and make sure I sat down with At and had a hangout and maybe smoked a gudang garam and like just had a laugh, but like just asked him how he was doing, and realized before that I had no idea what his story was. I had all these assumptions. We were like, oh, they just live there or from some neighboring island, and you just don't think about it.
Yeah.
Because you're there to like tune out from your hectic Western life that's so stressful. You got to go and have a holiday there or whatever. But it was so enriching. And so like what you're saying, if you are visiting, even if you are there for just a week, just having that conversation with those crew, who are you? What's your life like? Is there anything that could be better than what it is right now? Or
Yeah, and I think actually, like, from what you're saying, just made me think, like, also don't go there with the mindset that you're going to make their life better. Like,
Yeah.
you're not. Their life is beautiful. They have it so sorted out. They live in a way that they've created a civilization to be just all about community and helping each other from the moment you were born. You know, you are together with your tribe. You will always have your tribe. Your tribe always has you. And even if you're 2 years old, you have responsibility within that tribe. You know, they're popping out babies all the time. So it doesn't even matter. You'll see these little kids cradling a newborn and like shushing them to sleep, you know, or you'll see little boys going out and collecting little bits and bobs for their dads to go and build the next pig, like, what do you call it, little pig shack shelter thing that they build. Like, they have it so good. They sleep together on the floor every night all together. They cook all together. If there's a conflict, you get one of the tribal leaders to come together with a sikre, which is like a shaman, a medicine man kind of person. They'll come together and you'll all sit together and dance and talk and hash it out until the air is clear. Like, they don't need us to come in and give them what we consider to be something that's going to enrich their life. Like, that whole mindset is backwards. Like, just go there and be humble and learn. And if there is an opportunity to actually give something material and it's necessary, then yeah, do it. But they're not even set up like that. Like, it's almost awkward to give them gifts because they don't have this concept of mine and yours. So if you give something to someone, the others are like, what the hell? Like, that's only for them. We're a tribe. You know, where's ours? If you know what I mean? Like, you can't just now put them separate from everyone else and now they're the person with that. It's an awkward situation for them. So yeah, there's like that aspect of it. So I think, yeah, the best thing you can do is be curious and be kind and open your heart, and it'll all make sense of how you can quote unquote give, if that's what you want to do. Yeah.
That's so amazing, Ruby. You are such a powerhouse, and I'm sure, like Lauren was saying, it shows in your surfing, but also in just your clarity and your maturity. You're 25, yeah? And the life experiences you've put yourself in to gain that kind of perspective, that kind of clarity, is so wonderful and amazing to be able to sit here and learn from you. And for me, it's really humbling, because I know exactly the places you're talking about. I've seen the faces, I've smelt the air, I know where you're talking about, but I have zero depth of experience compared to what you're sharing. And it's like Lauren said, I think really hopeful for the surfing organism. And if we do look at ourselves as a culture that is united by the oceans around the world, and, you know, you can look in the eye of a surfer from another country, and even if you can't speak the same language as each other, you can relate to each other, hopefully in some way. And hopefully that way is a better way than we have done in the past.
Yeah.
And I see that with you, which is really hopeful.
Yeah, I think the whole world is changing in that direction in my lens of our generation sort of coming up, because we're, I guess, a little bit more face to face with some of the destruction. The lessons are in front of you. Not even just like that other people are ignoring them, but they're just way more in your face now and that kind of thing. But yeah, I got really lucky with the experiences that I had out there and to be there for so long, because even their culture is like quite under threat. Even if I went further south to HTs first, I would not have experienced anything cultural, because that's all been washed out through the missionaries that came through in the early last century. So even for them still to exist in the way that they do is like lucky.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so important what you said, and so humbling to think that we have anything to offer these people who have a depth of community connection to each other, to the living world. Like most of us making this podcast, listening to this podcast, have no real experiential knowledge
Yeah.
in the depth of living of the people that you're talking about.
And like how amazing for them, you know, the Sikare is like a medicine man type person. And to become a medicine man, to become a Sikare, you can also be a woman Sikare. To become a Sikare, you have to dedicate your life to being this Sikare, and you go through many different processes, and you're constantly adorned in all this ceremonial outfit, which is basically like minimal clothing and lots of beads and feathers and leaves and flowers, and it's beautiful. You can hear them coming from a mile away because they got bells, like the whole thing. And the Sikares have learnt in a similar way to the Indigenous Australians, like learnt through dreaming. Basically, they've developed this language where they can talk to animals and plants. And I've seen it happen in front of me, like at a ceremony, they sacrifice like a fair few pigs and chickens and other animals, and the pigs are freaking out, you know, as they do when they're tied up and they know what's going to happen. And they'll bring the pigs in to the middle of the tribe house, which is like an uma, and they'll bring it into the little bit in the middle that everyone sits around, and they'll put the pig on its side. They'll put a big bucket underneath where the pig's head is, and the Sikare will come with his leaf, and he'll rub this certain leaf exactly where he's going to put the knife, and the pig just goes from squealing and in torture to complete calm. He whispers a few words to it, and then they'll put the machete thing just straight through the neck into the heart, and then that's it, it's done, the pig's gone. And the pig's last moments are just so peaceful because of whatever the Sikare said to them. So, you know, they're living in a place with this kind of knowledge going around. Like and that's like the tip of the iceberg, you know, there's so much. If you're sick, the whole family will get together and dance all night with the Sikare, and they'll have certain kinds of blessings go on and certain kinds of languages that are being spoken to heal you. And they all can see spirits. Like this is throughout all of Indonesia, pretty much. Everyone can see spirits and has intimate experiences with that and understands that world so clearly. And like, yeah, it's amazing because I think it brings them so much more peace, you know, because when they pass on, they just get it, what's happening next. It's not like how it is for us. So yeah, there's so much that we can learn from going over there. So how cool is that? You get to go on a surf trip and probably your whole life gets to be changed, and all the shit mentalities that you have in your head just get washed away. Like
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you just arrived here on the farm and you came in with a bunch of flowers, and we are a huge fan of that kind of gesture. And
You taught me early on in our relationship, Dave, that I don't know who you learned the agreement from, but the agreement is never arrive empty-handed. Who taught you that?
I'm a little bit vague on who taught me that, but it could have been Jack McCoy or it could have been Howie Cook. And both elder kind of characters in my life. And I think it's probably Howie, who's a fellow Kiwi and just a wild man, activist, sailor,
We've been trying to have him on the
artist.
podcast
He'll
for
be here.
years, but
He'll be
he's
here. It'll happen. He's somewhere in
70
there. Yeah.
something and impossible to pin down. He's just
Still a live
Amazing.
wire, but
Amazing
he will.
activist.
So for this is how it works. It's like you arriving somewhere, and the sentiment is that you have basically considered the people you're visiting before you visit them, and it's kind of just this subtle gesture that you've thought of that you've thought of them. And so you're not just rocking up with the idea that you're going to arrive for something for yourself. You know, like if you arrive and you're like, you want to get fed or you, whatever, you're going to extract something for you as the visitor. You actually arrive first thing offering something physical that's like that. And like, so he'll rock up here sometimes and he'll just have a banana. Or a flower on the way here.
The
Something
feeling
as
is the
simple as that.
same.
It's
The feeling is
the
always the
object
same.
doesn't matter.
That's awesome.
Who taught
So,
you?
yeah, how did you-
someone teach this to you, Ruby?
Oh, I just think I witnessed it a lot. Yeah, I think it's common practice in a lot of places, and especially the more humble the community, the bigger the gestures, you know, which is so ironic or just so bizarre that that's how it goes, you know. So, yeah, in Ments, it was especially in fruiting season, you would rock up with like 20 kilos of like their local little lychee thing that they have. It's not rambutan, it's something else called like langit or something. And they're delicious. And they just fall off the tree like in tons. So yeah, it's so funny. You rock up and you've got this big thing of fruit to give them and they've got this even bigger thing of fruit to give you, and it's just ridiculous. Like, it's just a time where everyone's just stuffing their face 24/7 with fruit, and like, yeah, so I think it's normal.
But I noticed that in our American, Australian cultures of, quote, wealth, privilege, that is not a norm.
Yeah.
It's not a norm. In fact, it's quite common. People arrive expecting to be hosted. They expect to be given to. There's not an exchange as much as there is an expectation. It's very different.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's got to do with like just how it's hard to have your priorities straight when you're in the environment that we live in that's so stimulating, and you have so much expectation on you to become something and do something. And it's not because we as a culture are bad people. We're just very distracted.
I also feel like it's so busy that the food growing aspect of our lives isn't so common these days. So most of us go to the shop to get what we want to eat. But, you know, think about Jeff Lawton, think about Howie, any of our friends who also grow food. And if you know anything about growing food, when you grow it, is that you get gluts. Like when you grow something successfully, you get thousands of potatoes in the season. And all of our friends know that we come with many potatoes
Or
when
eggs.
it's potato season, or it's eggs all the time, or it's a huge hand of bananas or whatever. But things come in like sets,
Yeah.
in groups like that. And so when I feel like the last few years of diving into the food growing experience again and experiencing other people who are really adept at that, like Jeff. Like you always come with a cutting, even like just a cutting to put in that person's garden or whatever. It's like there's a surplus there, and it's the sharing of that surplus, the return of surplus and the permacultural words. But there's that part of it too, which I think is really special, and to understand that, if we return to having more intimate relationships with the planet and with the ecology we're a part of, then it's sort of like a natural thing that starts to happen. You'll have that abundance and you'll want to share it and take those bananas because you couldn't possibly eat another one. And you're like, take some.
That's the foundation of the gift economy, isn't it?
Reciprocity.
Yeah.
And the abundance of the living regenerative world.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, you know, when you're in that state and you've grown something and you're so proud of what you've grown, you know, you put so much love into it and it's overflowing within you, you know, not just even on the land, like you said, there's a million bloody bananas now, but like even within you, you're just like, this.
Yeah.
So you like, you know, you're in that place where sharing is the most natural thing that you can do, and being selfless is a natural action, not something that's premeditated.
Because the plants do all the work and they give us the gifts of food for free. How can you not want to spill that over and continue it onward? That's how I always feel that way. Of like, we get to pick this fruit, blueberries, mandarins, lemons. Like, this plant has done all of this work. We've done nothing except for maybe dig a hole and maybe feed it, maybe. And the sky has rained and the sun has shone. And like, as if you're not going to keep passing that on. It's so inspiring being close to plants like that. Ruby, you were part of the surf industry, the recent surf industry collapse. Lots of really talented surfers got cut from their sponsorships. You were one of them. So what have you done with that abundance of time?
So funny. Yeah, that was a classic, hey? When it happened, I went to Hawaii just for shits and gigs because I knew that that was the time for the season to be on there, and I was pretty curious to see what that whole thing's like. And I didn't like it. I've spent many years trying to get as far away from like everyone else and that whole kind of system. Being there where it's everything is about image, it was just repulsive. Just made me not understand surfing. I was like, whoa, I don't get this. Like, it's the intentions are kind of on a different planet there than what it is for me.
For me, it feels like the opposite of what we were just talking about. For me, the feeling is scarcity.
Yeah.
It's mine, it's hoarding, it's attention scarcity, it's resource scarcity, it's individualistic celebration instead of community and togetherness.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to make too many comments on it because I'm not in it. Like, I don't know what it's like for them, you know, like they do have their groups and stuff that maybe they thrive in and that kind of thing. And they've all got different motives. But for me, I just wanted to get really good waves and like had people the whole time telling me that I needed to go there. You need to go there. It's a proving grounds and all this kind of stuff. And like, it's the freaking craziest wave in the world and all this. And I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, I love surfing to be my own thing. That some days I'm such a kook and like completely suck and bog rail every turn but whatever, because I got to go out there. And there's nothing much else that I really wanted to do that day anyways. So, you know, just that's it. That's all that I need. I don't even need to get barreled off my face every surf, you know, like I'm not desperate for that. I feel pretty content if I'm just like out there and hopefully one links up. It's even like cool if you're just in a rhythm, you know, like maybe you didn't even surf that good on the wave, but if you're in a rhythm and it's easy and you're connected and there's something going on that's making a lot of sense, that's even really cool.
That is so cool. I think about this a lot, how I'm not I'm a mediocre surfer, but I know the feeling that you mean. And it's also like there's a goodness about it because you're like that surfer, maybe they're not surfing the most technically best of who's in the water or whatever, or to the best standard in the world, but like they're in rhythm, they're in tune. And that's also good and defines what it means to be like a capable water person, irrespective of what kind of turn or what kind of tube you're getting. I feel like this is like there's subtlety in the surfing experience in this kind of conversation that I really like. I find it really interesting.
So that's like where I'm at with surfing, I guess, is following that around and discovering that, there's just an abundance of exceptional waves that don't have that many crew surfing them, which is crazy. I didn't even know that was a thing anymore. And just I've been lucky that for a while, the thought I've always had is that like if you're going to have to work in your life, you have to do something for the betterment of something more than yourself. Like you just would suck your soul away to do anything else. So I got lucky. I came home and now have got a job where the whole time I just get to try to create safety for other people and convince them that they are capable of anything they want because they've never been told that. And I was lucky that I always believed that in myself. And I can really see that like that is what changes people's lives, is like starting to feel seen and heard and then planting a little seed of like, oh, you're really capable of doing whatever you want. You know, like they've got a goal, even if their goal is to go to uni, like but convincing them that they're capable of doing that is really cool. And like watching them like light up just a little bit and then a little bit more and then a little bit more. So I'm just going to follow that around. And I'm learning a lot about this country and the truth of our history of colonization and pre-colonization. And that's the most exciting thing I've done in so long. So just seeing wherever that takes me. And I know that I'll find myself very soon kind of on more remote country and in, more raw and real communities, experiencing the beauty and the pain that we've caused as a civilization, as a colonized civilization. So yeah, just going to see where that goes. But life's pretty good. Life is pretty good. I'm not stressed about anything. I work with older ladies and they're always saying that to me, like, oh, your life. Like, because they don't surf and they're like, that's amazing. What a gift. Like, and you're young and you're single and you can do whatever you want and you just, you just live in every day. And so it's cool to always be told that. And that's how I feel. I'm like, it couldn't get any better than this. Like, I'm stoked, I don't need anything else. So that's cool.
When you think of the word success, Ruby, who or what do you think of?
Like, this is what I think of, the feeling that I have in my heart right now. Yeah. That's like, if that can be carried with me throughout my life experiences, then I know it'll come and it'll go and that kind of thing. But if I can hold that even when it starts to fade away, like, I think that's pretty successful. And my granddad was like that. He, died a really, really happy guy. He would sleep with a smile on his face. It was like whenever my cousins would come up and visit, it was like our favourite thing to do, like open the little door, see him there, like, like he was full of life and kindness and generosity and just didn't bother with anything that wasn't worth bothering about. So I feel like that's success. And I've seen that time and time and time and time and time again in, no surprise to anyone, in the places where there's a lack of material goods and material needs, and everything is just about the community, your spiritual growth, and contributing to the betterment of who you're around.
How do you attend to your spiritual growth now? Has yoga stuck with you, or is there a new practice that's taken its place?
Funny. I don't like stretch or anything like that. And I don't sit there and like meditate all day long or anything like this at all. I used to think that's what you had to do. But now, you know how I was saying that I've come back and I just feel like everything's settled within me? It just feels that I've managed to learn a few lessons and I've managed to keep them close to my heart. And for me, growing spiritually is just remembering what I think is a universal truth and letting that guide me. Because I never really had like guidance at all. Even on my whole trip, I was trying so fucking hard to find like some guru, some monk, somebody tell me what to do, like some lord, like because listening to your guys' episodes, you had about 100 million freaking guides of all these lords telling you, like pointing you in the right direction. And I was like, God, I've never come across someone like that. And I even went to the bloody Himalayas. I was hiking in the Himalayas and I was 17, staying in these monasteries, hitchhiking around, going from monastery to monastery to monastery. I stayed in Tabu Monastery, which is where the Dalai Lama will retire to if he decides to retire in his lifetime. All these zones, like not with the intention of finding a guru, but definitely like if one happened to come along, And it just like, it's so funny. It was like my life path just was repulsed by anything like that. It didn't let anything like that get near me. So I think, just from what I learned, I tried to let that flourish within me. And I feel like now I'm really lucky because I feel that there's some kind of core inside of me that is safe because it feels like it knows what existence is, and the really subtle things it really cares about, and all the rest of the stuff it doesn't. So I just try to, in times of turmoil, just sit back in there and watch it all sort of, the craziness go past me and watch all the emotions go and just stay at my center and be like, oh, it'll pass.
Thanks for listening with us today. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented, absolute legend, Ben Jake Alexander. The soundtrack was composed by Shannon Soul Carroll, with additional tunes by Ben. We have a few new Water People experiments this season. You can find every episode of the podcast on our Water People YouTube page. or subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter to get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, and behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast and more via our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast.